Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be reading Sophie Scott Goes South by Alison Lester. And this looks like a picture of the world. Map of the world showing our voyage to Mawson Station. Hobart to Mawson Station equals 5,475 kilometers. And there it is, an arrow going from Hobart to Mawson Station. Sophie Scott Goes South by Alison Lester. Woohoo! I'm going to Antarctica. That's right, me, Sophie Scott. I'm 9 years old and I'm going to Antarctica with my dad. We're delivering people and supplies to Mawson Station. We'll be the last visitors there before winter comes and the ocean freezes. We'll be at sea for about a month. It will take nearly 2 weeks to get there. Then, after a week at Mawson, it will be time to come home. I'll see icebergs, penguins, seals, and whales. Dad says there might even be blizzards. I can't wait! Now here's things I will see in Antarctica. We have whales, another whale. What do you think this whale is called on the left? Some icebergs, seals, penguins. No polar bears, they're only in the Arctic. And here we have a picture of what Sophie might see. Pause the video and see how many animals you can spot in this picture. I can see a penguin. What else can you see? Mum was being brave when she hugged me goodbye at the airport, but I could see tears in her eye. Alfie was sad too, so I promised to bring him back some Antarctic ice. When our plane was arriving in Hobart, I could see the Aurora Australis in the harbour. She looked tiny from the air, but when I stood beside her, Dad says ships are always girls. I could see she was enormous, as long as a soccer ground and 5 stories high. And look at this. Dad has these stamps in his desk on the bridge. Dad carried my bags to our cabin, and I unpacked my things. My bunk has a little curtain I can pull across. There's a reading light just above my pillow, and it feels like a cubby house. It's nice knowing Dad will be just on the other side of the cabin. I climbed up to the top deck and watched as passengers lugged bags up the gangway, and a big crane swung a net full of cargo onto the ship. That's an interesting word. What is a gangway? When everything was packed, Dad blew the horn and the ship moved slowly away from the dock. We threw lolly-colored streamers to the people waving and held it on until the streamers snapped and the water between us got wider and wider. As we left Hobart, a big moon reflected on the water and lights twinkled along the hills. I felt like an astronaut, heading into outer space, a bit scared, but very excited. And here are some real-life pictures of the Aurora Australis. Here it says, this is the Aurora Australis. Here's the anchors, some switches, lifeboats, life ring, Aurora 2, winch, and here's the gangway. Last night, I felt safe and snug as the ship crashed through the waves. I love my little bunk. I'm still finding my sea legs, but I haven't felt seasick. Dad says I have the ocean in my veins. I'm very careful when I'm on deck. 1 hand for the ship and 1 for yourself, is what Dad says. He means, always hang on. It would be terrible to fall overboard. There are 62 people on the ship, plus me, and I met most of them today. 23 are crew members, and the rest are the Mawson Resupply Expedition. They are the voyage leader and his deputy, 16 people going to stay at Mawson for a year, 12 visiting scientists, 6 people to drive boats, 2 crane operators, one artist, Mum's friend Sarah, and the crew. And we have a lot of crew members here that go across the whole page. Some things on the ship have special names. My bunk is called a berth, the window is a porthole, the kitchen is the galley, and the dining room is the mess. I made a new friend today, Georgie, who is going to Mawson for a year to study penguins. She taught me a dance called the penguin strut. This morning, we put on our life jackets and all went to the heli deck for a muster, where we learnt about safety and rescue. We climbed into the big orange lifeboats hanging off the side of the ship. Each one fits 70 people, and the toilet is a bucket. The food is stale sea biscuits. I hope we don't ever have to use the lifeboats. Dad says I shouldn't worry. He's been to Antarctica lots of times and never been shipwrecked. And in the bottom we have the rest of the crew. Can you see some of the parts of the boat that Sophie was talking about? Like the life deck or the heli deck on this picture here? Day 5. I've missed a couple of days in my diary because the sea has been so rough. Last night, the ship was rocking and rolling like crazy. Anything that's not tied down goes flying and I have to hold on all the time. Sometimes a wave bashes the ship so hard that it feels as though we've hit a rock. The dining room portholes go underwater every time the ship does a big roll. It's like we're eating inside a washing machine. Hardly anyone came to breakfast this morning because lots of people are seasick. Mum's friend Sarah has given me a desk in her studio where I can draw and paint. It's a tiny cabin with no windows. Sarah says that being in this room is like being in the belly of a whale because the pipes in the walls moan and groan like a rumbling tummy. I'm not allowed to go on deck by myself when the sea is this rough, but this afternoon, Dad let me go with Sarah to take some photos. The wind was so strong and cold I could hardly breathe. The ship rolled beneath us like a bucking horse and we watched an albatross sweep over the waves. And here are some pictures of birds and albatrosses. Day 7. When I looked out my porthole this morning, there were 2 big icebergs on the horizon. My first icebergs. Dad steered the ship close to one, and it was as big as a 15-story building. It looked like a giant crouching lion. We also passed a jade iceberg, and one with a big black stripe. The stripe was a rock that had been picked up by the ice when it was part of a glacier grinding slowly over Antarctica. And here on the top right, snow falls, compresses into ice. Glacier moves slowly to coast, then over ocean. Ice shelves, chunks of ice break off and become icebergs. Cross-section showing how an iceberg is formed. I was toasty today in my special polar clothes. First, I put on a thermal top and long johns, thick woolen socks, neck warmer, polar fleece top and pants, freezer suit, insulated snow boots, mittens, beanie, sunglasses, and finally, a big Gore-Tex jacket. I looked like a Teletubby. As we head towards Antarctica, it feels as though we are entering an icy kingdom and the icebergs are guarding it. I saw heaps of icebergs today, gave them all names. Which iceberg name do you like the most? And on this page we have icebergs and real photos of them. I'd love to paddle a canoe through here. Tubular bergs, berg with a stripe, first berg in the shape of a lion. And this is the jade berg. Day 10. Brrr, I'm so cold I can hardly type. Last night there was a wild blizzard and I couldn't sleep. I was sliding up and down in my bed like a yo-yo. This morning the decks were covered with ice and snow and it was too dangerous to go outside. After lunch the storm died down and the ship had to go slowly because the sea was covered up with broken up ice. There were loud bongs as icebergs just below the surface bashed into the ship's hull. Adam, the first mate, told me these icebergs are called growlers. I loved looking at the ice cracking as the aurora pushed through it, and while I was watching, a seal poked its head through the ice. It looked right at me, and I waved and shouted, "Hello, seal!" Then it was gone. Georgie said it was a crab-eater seal. They don't eat crabs, they eat krill. Maybe they should be called krill-eater seals. I saw my first penguins too. 6 Adelies standing on an ice floe. They looked like tiny waiters in dinner suits. The sun didn't set until 10:30, and by the time I came inside, my toes and fingers were frozen. And here is a picture of a growler. Only 1/10 of an iceberg is above the surface. What do you think that means? If it means the rest of the iceberg is underwater, how big do you think these icebergs are? And here's a picture of a seal that looks to be trapped in ice. Dad thought we would be at Mawson Station this morning, but the sea ice is too thick for us to get any closer. He's worried we'll get stuck if we keep going, so the ship has stopped. We can see the mountain peaks behind Mawson, and it's driving everybody crazy that we are so close, but we still can't get there. I helped sweep the ice and snow off the heli deck so the helicopters can take the visiting scientists ashore. They only have a week to do their work, so they need to start straight away. Georgie went on the helicopter, but Sarah is still on the ship with me. We're keeping our fingers crossed that the ice will clear. That's the heli deck, chopper flying past massive Mawson ice cave. Lines on the sea show it's really windy, big cracks in the ice and frozen waves. Day 13. Hooray! Last night the wind blew so hard it shifted the sea ice, clearing the way for the ship to get to Mawson. I stood on the monkey deck as we went in, and the wind was like a freezing hurricane. I couldn't hold my camera steady, and I couldn't stand up unless I was sheltering behind someone. Dad steered the ship into a tiny horseshoe harbor and parked her like a car. People from Mawson sped out to the ship in rubber boats. They picked up the mooring ropes and took them back to the bollards on the rocky shore. Soon, the Aurora Australis was tied up safely. I felt very proud when I heard people saying what a great skipper Scotty was. Day 14. This morning, I was so excited about going ashore that I woke up too early and Dad made me go back to bed for a while. After breakfast, we climbed down a rope ladder to a barge waiting below. It was scary trying to hang on, with the ship moving up and down. When I stepped on land, my smile was so big it felt like my face was going to crack. I was standing on Antarctica! The ground was rough and rocky, with patches of snow. Thick ropes linked all the buildings, and Sarah told me this is to stop you getting lost in a blizzard. We walked up to the red shed, the building that the Mawson people live in. As soon as I got inside, I started to feel sick and dizzy. It felt as if the building was heavy like a ship, up and down, up and down. I didn't feel seasick on the ship, but I was seasick on land. The station leader, Jenny, said this happens to lots of people. She welcomed everybody and told us the station rules. Then we helped put away supplies. There were huge boxes of toothpaste, toilet paper, soap and shampoo, and massive amounts of food, like 5,400 eggs and 165 tubs of ice cream. Later, Georgie took me for a walk and we watched a Weddell seal scratching his whiskers with a flipper. He was groaning and moaning, and I think he had eaten too many fish. It was good to get back to the ship tonight and show Dad my photos. Katrina brought me a dinner in bed because I was so tired. And on the left is a picture of a Weddell seal, and he's scratching his nose. And this is another picture of Weddell seals. Day 15. When we went ashore this morning, Sarah and I explored around the station. We had lunch in the red shed. Then Jeff, the station doctor, took us for a drive up to the plateau. As we went up the hill, the Hägglund couldn't get a grip and kept slipping backwards towards the sea. I was thinking how bad it would be to crash into the freezing water when Jeff finally gunned it to the top and we all cheered. Take a guess what a Hägglund might be from the information here. Do you think it could be that picture on the right there? Before we got out, we hooked spiky chains under our boots because the ice was as slippery as glass. I took some photos, but we didn't stay for long because it was so cold. As we bumped back to the station, the sky went dark and hail started bashing against the windscreen. When we got out of the Hägglund, it was snowing so heavily we could hardly see. Sarah and I held onto the ropes between the buildings and finally got to the red shed. When Jenny called Dad on the radio, he told us we would have to stay ashore. The weather was too wild for us to go back to the ship. It was a blizzard! I was stranded in Antarctica. Georgie put mattresses on the floor of her room for Sarah and me, and we were like little mice, snuggled up together. Just before I went to sleep, Georgie played me a recording of a Weddell seal singing under the ice, and its lovely song stayed in my head all night. And these are real pictures of Mawson Station. There's the Hägglund. There's the red shed. An Antarctic trailer. Ship with crane up. Quad bikes. This is called an apple hut. Ice, snow, my feet. A communications shed. A wind turbine. Antarctic caravan. I took this photo from the red shed. Very cool. Would you ever want to go to Mawson Station? This morning, the wind was howling and the walls of the red shed shook as though a monster was trying to get in. It was way too dangerous to go outside. 14 people from the ship were stranded ashore, and we all helped with jobs. I dried dishes and helped Sarah mop the floor. Everybody was kind to me, but I felt lonely and worried about Dad. I watched the ship swinging from side to side, and it looked as though the ropes would break, for sure. In the afternoon, the blizzard got so strong that we couldn't even see the aurora. It was a whiteout. And these are pictures from 11, 12, 1:45 and 3 p.m. You almost can't even see the ship anymore. Georgie and Sarah played Polar Scrabble with me, and I think they let me win. After lunch, Jenny gave me the phone so I could talk to Mum and Alfie. While Mum was talking, I could hear the magpies singing outside our house. By dinner time, the blizzard had died down. It was still too dangerous to go back to the ship, but we were allowed to go outside. When Georgie and I were walking, we had to hold on to each other to stop being blown over. We saw an Adelaide penguin, completely covered in ice. Georgie said it wouldn't feel cold because penguin feathers are good insulation. Sarah made this picture of an emperor penguin. I helped do the dots. What do you think it means by the penguin's feathers are good insulation? How do you think this helps them out? Day 17. Last night, Sarah and Georgie woke me up to show me a surprise. They helped me get dressed. We went outside and they pointed up. A band of light stretched across the sky, shimmering and dancing in front of the stars. It began over the sea and swooped above us in a wide stripe of neon green. It was as though a ghost had zoomed across the sky, then disappeared with a flick of its tail. It was an aurora. They're caused when particles of the sun crash into the Earth's atmosphere above the poles. In the Arctic, it's called aurora borealis. In Antarctica, its name is aurora australis, the same name as our ship. I woke up to a sunny day today, and a nice surprise because Dad arrived while I was having breakfast. It was great to see him, and he hugged me until I had to yell for a breath. I took him to see the penguins, and we had to go on the climbing wall. Dad was hopeless, but I couldn't climb like a spider. After that, we went back to the ship. Day 18. We have 2 more days at Mawson, and when we leave, there will be no more visitors for 7 months. Only 16 people will stay here for winter. That's when Georgie will ride her quad bike over the sea ice to Ostarookery. She'll live on a nearby Macy Island in a tiny red apple hut and study the emperor penguins. There are more than 20,000 penguins there. That's a lot of penguins. Day 19. Goodbye, Mawson. This morning, the helicopters flew out to the ship. We are taking them home with us. I watched the engineers unscrew the rotor blades and stow them in a big box. Then they pushed the choppers into the hangar and tied them down. After lunch, I heard the ship's shooter and raced up on deck to wave to Georgie. Everybody staying at Mawson came down to Horseshoe Harbour to farewell us. They let off pink flares that drifted down through the snowy sky. The sea was freezing into little pancakes of ice, and Dad was anxious to get going. If we weren't quick, we'd be stuck at Mawson for the winter. We crashed through the ice all afternoon. Some bits were so big that the ship tilted as she slid over them. All the people who have been at Mawson are excited to get going home. The visiting scientists have done their work, and I think Dad and the crew are happy that we didn't get stuck. After dinner, we had a King Neptune ceremony to celebrate crossing the Antarctic Circle. We should have done it on the way down, but the weather was too rough. Adam was dressed up as King Neptune and Dad was a mermaid. We had to kiss a dead fish. Yuck! And these are Antarctic colors. Everyone told me Antarctica would be white, but look at this! Did you think Antarctica would be white? Day 22. The ice has been so thick it's taken us 3 days to get this far. This morning at sunrise, we saw some killer whales beside the ship. Their shiny black bodies stood out against the golden sea. Some were putting their heads right out of the water as we went past. This is called spy hopping. After lunch, Sarah showed me photos of her polar trips and told me about some of the famous Antarctic explorers. This is Roald Amundsen from Norway, who was the first to the South Pole in 1911. This is Sir Ernest Shackleton. He was from Ireland In 1909, he nearly made it to the South Pole, but had to turn back when he ran out of food. Afterwards, he said to his wife, "A live donkey is better than a dead lion, isn't it?" Shackleton is famous for getting all his men home safely after his ship, the Endurance, was crushed by an ice in 1914. Sir Robert Scott, same name as me, was also called Scott of the Antarctic. He was English. He tried to be the first to the South Pole, but Amundsen beat him by a month. He and his men starved to death on their way back. And this is Sir Douglas Mawson from Australia, who explored Antarctica. In 1912, he made it through terrible blizzards after both his companions died. This time of Antarctic history is called the Heroic Age because the explorers were so brave. And we have some pictures down here. Scott's hut at Cape Evans, Amundsen's hut, Mawson hut at Commonwealth Bay, the Endurance being crushed, the stove that kept Shackleton's hut warm. What picture of a whale is this? Day 25. We've been out of the ice for 2 days now. This morning, the ship stopped to pick up an underwater microphone called an acoustic recording package. The scientists on the ship left it here a year ago to record ocean noises. Today, technicians floated it to the surface. Whale experts back home will listen and find out what the whales have been saying. After lunch, it was sunny, even though it was still -4 degrees. Sarah and I took photos of the cooks pretending to sunbake in front of an iceberg. That was our last iceberg. I felt sad that we wouldn't see any more. When we were in the ice, it seemed they would last forever. It was Dad's birthday today, and I got to carry out the cake on a big silver tray. Tonight, the sun set over confused seas. I love that name. It sounds as if the sea can't figure out something, but it really means there are waves coming from all directions. Only 4 days until we get home. I'm going to miss my little bunk that rocks me to sleep every night. And this must be the picture of the ship they are on. Do you remember what the ship was called? Day 30. When I woke up this morning, the ship wasn't moving, and when I looked out my porthole, there was Hobart. We were tied up to the dock. After breakfast, we all swapped email addresses and said goodbye. Sarah gave me a beautiful painting of whales and icebergs to take home to Mum. Then, everybody walked down the gangway with their bags. The ship felt still and quiet when they were gone. I packed up my things, peeled my pictures off the wall, then lay on my bunk and waited for Dad. Soon he came. "Come on, Sophie. Sophie of the Antarctic," he said. "Let's go home." And so we did. And there she is, holding Alfie's ice. And that was Sophie Scott Goes South by Alison Lester. What's something you learned in this book? Maybe about Antarctica, or maybe how they work in Antarctica. Do you think it changes how you think about Antarctica? Would you want to go there? Anyways, that was Sophie Scott Goes South by Alison Lester. If you liked the video, like and subscribe. Bye bye!